My family's tradition of favoring my younger sister, Chloe, was as predictable as the sunrise. Every vacation, every holiday, it was the same old story. Chloe first, then everyone else. This trip to the lake house was supposed to be different, a chance for us to reconnect as adults. But as soon as Mom announced the sleeping arrangements, I knew I was kidding myself. The drive to the lake house was filled with the usual dynamic. My mom, Carol, in the passenger seat, constantly checked on Chloe in the back, making sure she had enough snacks, if the air conditioning was blowing directly on her, and if she was comfortable enough to nap. My dad, Tom, drove in silence, occasionally nodding at something Mom said about Chloe. And me? I was in the back next to Chloe, staring out the window, watching the familiar scenery blur by. At 35, you'd think I'd be used to it. 28 years of being the responsible older sister had etched this pattern into my bones. This trip was my idea. After years of putting it off, I finally had a decent chunk of vacation time saved up, and I thought a few days away at the lake house we used to visit as kids might do us all some good. A chance to relax, maybe even talk like the adults we were supposed to be. I'd even offered to bring all the groceries and handle the cooking. My treat, I'd said, hoping to buy a little bit of connection. We finally pulled up to the familiar, slightly weathered cabin. It looked smaller than I remembered, but the view of the lake still took my breath away. The late afternoon sun glinted off the water, promising a beautiful sunset. "Oh, it's just perfect," Chloe exclaimed, finally putting down her phone. At 27, she still had that youthful glow, the one that always seemed to melt Mom and Dad's hearts a little more than my own slightly more lived-in appearance. "Isn't it, sweetie?" Mom agreed, turning around to beam at her. "Your father and I will take the master bedroom, of course. It's got the best view." "Sounds good," Chloe said, already reaching for the door handle. "Which room is mine?" That's when it happened, the moment I knew my efforts were, as usual, in vain. "Well," Mom started, looking a little hesitant, "there are only 2 other bedrooms. One has a queen bed, and the other has a set of bunk beds." My eyebrows shot up. "And?" I prompted, already knowing where this was going. Mom looked at me, a familiar apologetic smile on her face. "Honey, you know Chloe can't sleep in a bunk bed. She gets claustrophobic." Chloe dramatically shuddered. "Oh God, Mom, don't even joke. Remember that time at summer camp?" Right. Summer camp. When Chloe was 10 and I was 18 and she'd cried all night because she had to sleep on the top bunk. I, of course, had gotten the bottom bunk and spent the night comforting her. "So," I said slowly, trying to keep the irritation out of my voice, "Chloe gets the queen bed, and I get the bunk beds?" Dad finally spoke up, his voice calm, almost dismissive. "Now, Sarah, don't make a fuss. It's just for a few nights." "A fuss?" I repeated incredulously. "So it's not a fuss that your 35-year-old daughter gets relegated to the bunk beds while the 27-year-old gets the queen?" Mom sighed, the kind of sigh that implied I was being deliberately difficult. "Sarah, Chloe needs her rest. She's been so stressed with her influencer work." Chloe nodded solemnly. "It's really demanding, Sarah. You wouldn't understand." Influencer work, right. Posting filtered photos of herself and linking to various fast fashion websites. Demanding. I worked as a software engineer, dealing with deadlines and complex coding issues, but apparently that wasn't demanding. "And I don't need rest?" I asked, the sarcasm dripping from my tone. "I didn't drive half the way here? I'm not the one who offered to cook and do all the grocery shopping?" Now, Dad said, trying to mediate. "Let's not get all worked up. The bunk beds are perfectly comfortable." He'd never slept in them in his life. Comfortable for a 10-year-old, maybe? I muttered under my breath. "Look," Mom said, her tone shifting slightly, the warning signs flashing in my brain. "Can't you just be a little considerate of your sister for once? She's not feeling 100%. Not feeling 100%. That was their go-to excuse for Chloe's entitled behavior. She'd been not feeling 100% for the better part of her adult life, it seemed. I took a deep breath, trying to tamp down the familiar surge of resentment. This was supposed to be a relaxing vacation. I shouldn't let this get to me. It was just a sleeping arrangement, right? But it wasn't just about the sleeping arrangement. It was about the constant, subtle, and sometimes not so subtle ways they always put Chloe first. It was about the years of feeling like my needs and wants were secondary, like I was just expected to be the accommodating older sister who always understood. "Fine," I said, my voice flat. "Chloe can have the queen bed. I'll take the luxurious bunk beds." The rest of the afternoon followed the usual script. Chloe unpacked her seemingly endless supply of clothes, spreading them out over the queen bed and the surrounding furniture. Mom hovered around her, offering to help her organize. Dad turned on the TV in the living room and promptly fell asleep in his recliner. I unpacked my small bag in the bunk bedroom. The bottom bunk sagged slightly, and the top bunk looked like it hadn't been slept in since I was probably 12. I sighed and tossed my pillow onto the lower mattress. Later, as I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, a lasagna I'd spent the better part of the evening making the night before, Chloe wandered in, phone in hand. "Hey," she said, not even looking up from her screen. "Mom said you're making lasagna. Can you make sure there's no ricotta? I'm trying to cut back on dairy." I stopped stirring the sauce. "Chloe, I already made it. It has ricotta." She finally looked up, her face scrunching up in distaste. "Ugh, seriously? You know I don't like ricotta." "No, actually, I didn't know you didn't like ricotta. You've eaten my lasagna with ricotta for years." "Well, I don't anymore," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Can you, make me something else?" I stared at her, my hands tightening around the wooden spoon. "Chloe, I made enough lasagna to feed an army. There are plenty of other things you can eat. There's salad, there's bread." "But I wanted lasagna," she whined. Mom walked into the kitchen, drawn by the sound of our voices. "What's going on, girls?" "Sarah made lasagna with ricotta," Chloe complained, pointing at the bubbling dish in the oven. "She knows I don't like ricotta." Mom looked at me, her expression suggesting I'd committed a major culinary crime. "Sarah, honey, you should have asked Chloe what she wanted." "I offered to make dinner," I said, trying to keep my voice even. I didn't realize I needed to cater to everyone's specific dietary whims. "Well, it's just common courtesy," Mom said, as if that settled the matter. "Chloe can be a bit picky." A bit picky? That was an understatement. Chloe's pickiness had dictated family meals for years. We'd gone to countless restaurants where the menu had to be vetted by Chloe beforehand. "So, what am I supposed to do?" I asked, gesturing to the lasagna. "Throw it out and make something else just for Chloe?" Dad wandered into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "What's all the commotion?" Mom explained the ricotta situation. Dad looked at me, a slight frown on his face. "Sarah, can't you just make Chloe a grilled cheese or something?" A grilled cheese, after I'd spent hours planning and preparing this meal. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't just the ricotta or the bunk beds. It was the culmination of years of feeling like my efforts were never truly appreciated. Like I was always expected to bend over backwards for Chloe, while my own needs were consistently overlooked. "No," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Everyone stared at me. "No, I'm not making Chloe a separate dinner," I continued. "There's plenty for her to eat. If she doesn't want lasagna, she can make herself a sandwich." Chloe's mouth dropped open. "Are you serious?" "Yes, Chloe, I am serious," I said, meeting her gaze. "I'm tired of always having to accommodate your every whim. I made dinner for the family. If you don't like it, that's your prerogative." Mom looked like I'd just slapped her. "Sarah, how can you be so inconsiderate?" "Inconsiderate?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "Mom, who's really being inconsiderate here? I offered to do something nice for all of us, and all I've gotten is complaints and expectations that I'll bend to Chloe's every preference." Dad stepped forward, his expression hardening. "Now listen here, young lady." "No, Dad. You listen, I interrupted, my voice trembling slightly but still firm. I'm done. I'm done being the one who always gives in, the one who always puts everyone else first. This is supposed to be a vacation for me too, you know? I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving them standing there in stunned silence. I went to the bunk bedroom and sat down on the lower bunk, the springs creaking beneath me. I could hear their muffled voices from the kitchen, probably discussing my sudden outburst. A few minutes later, Mom knocked tentatively on the door. I hesitated for a moment before saying, "Come in." She opened the door and stood there, her usual calm demeanor slightly ruffled. "Sarah, can we talk?" "What is there to talk about, Mom?" I asked, my voice still tight. "You're going to tell me I need to be more understanding of Chloe, right? That she's special and needs extra consideration?" Mom sighed. "Honey, Chloe has always been a little more sensitive." "Sensitive?" I scoffed. "Mom, she's a grown woman. She's not a delicate flower. She's perfectly capable of making herself a sandwich if she doesn't want lasagna." "But," Mom started, then stopped, seemingly unsure of what to say. "But nothing, Mom," I said. "I'm not going to apologize for finally standing up for myself. For once, I'm putting my own needs first." Mom looked at me, a flicker of something, maybe surprise, maybe even a hint of understanding, in her eyes. But it was quickly replaced by the familiar look of concern for Chloe. "Well," she said finally, "I suppose Chloe can just have some leftovers from lunch." She turned and left the room, closing the door softly behind her. I leaned back against the wall, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. This wasn't the relaxing family vacation I'd envisioned. In fact, it was turning out to be just another reminder of the ingrained dynamics that had defined my relationship with my family for as long as I could remember. As the evening wore on, the tension in the house remained thick. Dinner was a quiet affair. I ate my lasagna, Chloe picked at some leftover chicken salad, and Mom and Dad tried to keep the conversation light, but the underlying awkwardness was palpable. Later, as I was getting ready for bed in the cramped bunk bedroom, I heard a knock on the door again. This time, it was Chloe. She stood in the doorway, looking slightly sheepish. "Hey," she said softly. "Can I come in?" I nodded, and she stepped into the small room, perching on the edge of the lower bunk. "Look," she began, fiddling with the hem of her pajama top. "I'm sorry about the lasagna thing. I didn't mean to be difficult." I raised an eyebrow, surprised by her unexpected apology. "Really?" She nodded. "Yeah, I guess I'm used to getting my way." She looked up at me, a hint of vulnerability in her eyes. "Mom and Dad they kind of baby me." "You think?" I said dryly. She actually giggled a little. "Okay, yeah, they totally baby me, and I guess I've gotten used to it. But you're right. It's not fair to you." I stared at her, completely taken aback. This was not the Chloe I knew. "So," she continued, "I was thinking, maybe we could switch rooms? You take the queen bed and I'll try the bunk beds." She looked a little apprehensive as she said the last part. I hesitated for a moment. Part of me wanted to say no, to make her experience the discomfort I'd been assigned. But another part of me, the part that still held on to the hope of having a real connection with my sister, felt a flicker of something akin to hope. "You'd really be okay with the bunk beds?" I asked. She shrugged. "I mean, it's only for a few nights, right? And maybe it'll be like when we were kids." She smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that I hadn't seen in years. A small smile touched my own lips. "Okay," I said. "We can switch." Maybe, just maybe, this vacation wouldn't be a complete disaster after all. Maybe, for the first time in a long time, things were starting to shift, even if just a little bit. The next morning, the switch in rooms felt different. Not drastically so, but there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Chloe, surprisingly, didn't complain about the top bunk. In fact, when I saw her at breakfast, she even joked about feeling like a kid again. Breakfast itself was a much more pleasant affair. I'd made pancakes, and Chloe ate them without any fuss. Mom and Dad seemed a little surprised by the change in dynamic, but they didn't say anything, just exchanged a few knowing glances. Throughout the day, there was a noticeable effort from Chloe to be more considerate. She offered to help me with the dishes, she didn't monopolize the TV, and she even asked me about work. It was like a switch had flipped, and I found myself cautiously optimistic. That evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, we were all sitting on the porch, enjoying the view. Mom and Dad were reminiscing about old family vacations, and Chloe and I were actually listening and occasionally chiming in. It felt almost normal. Then, Chloe's phone buzzed, breaking the comfortable silence. She glanced at the screen, her expression suddenly shifting. "It's Liam," she said, her voice tight. Liam was her on-again, off-again boyfriend, a perpetually unemployed musician who Mom and Dad didn't particularly care for. She stood up. "I'm just going to take this inside." We watched her go, a familiar sense of unease settling over me. Chloe and Liam's phone calls usually ended in tears or arguments. A few minutes later, the screen door slammed open, and Chloe stormed back onto the porch, her face red and blotchy. "That jerk!" she exclaimed, her voice shaking. "I can't believe him." "What happened, honey?" Mom asked, her voice full of concern. He posted something online," Chloe sobbed, pulling out her phone and shoving it in Mom's face. "Look!" Mom took the phone, her brow furrowing as she read the post. It was a picture of Liam with another girl, tagged at some fancy restaurant in the city. The caption read something about having a real connection for once. Chloe burst into tears, sinking into one of the porch chairs. Mom immediately went to her, wrapping her arms around her and murmuring soothing words. Dad patted Chloe's arm awkwardly. And me? I just watched, a strange mix of pity and something else churning inside me. This was classic Chloe. Drama always seemed to follow her. "He's such a pig!" Chloe wailed. I thought things were going well." "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry," Mom said, stroking her hair. "He's not good enough for you anyway." Dad nodded in agreement. "That boy's a loser. You deserve better." They continued to comfort Chloe, their attention completely focused on her distress. I sat there, feeling a familiar pang of something. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was more like invisibility. Here was my sister, having a dramatic breakup, and all the attention was immediately on her. No one even glanced my way. No one asked if I was okay. Even though I was the one who had initiated this trip, who had tried to create this family bonding experience. Then, Chloe said something that made me freeze. "And the worst part is," she sniffled, looking up at Mom with tear-filled eyes. He said I was boring, that all I ever do is take selfies and buy clothes." Mom gasped. "He said that? How dare he?" "Yeah," Chloe continued, her voice gaining a dramatic edge. "He said I don't have any real friends, that everyone just pretends to like me because of my online persona." That's when it hit me. A memory, sharp and clear, surfaced in my mind. A few months ago, I'd been talking to Chloe about feeling lonely. I'd mentioned how hard it was to make genuine connections as an adult, how sometimes I felt like I didn't have any real friends outside of work. Chloe had listened, nodding sympathetically, or so I thought. Now, hearing her recount Liam's cruel words, something clicked. Those weren't Liam's words. Those were my words. Words I had confided in my sister, thinking she would understand. A cold wave of realization washed over me. Chloe hadn't been sympathetic. She'd been taking notes, collecting ammunition, waiting for the right moment to use my vulnerabilities against me, or at least to make herself the victim by proxy. The anger that had been simmering beneath the surface all these years finally boiled over. It wasn't just about the bunk beds or the lasagna anymore. It was about the constant manipulation, the way Chloe always managed to position herself as the center of attention, even at the expense of others. And it was about my own naivete, my willingness to believe that things could actually change. I stood up abruptly, the porch chair scraping against the wooden floor. "You know what, Chloe?" I said, my voice dangerously low. "Maybe Liam has a point." Everyone turned to look at me, their expressions a mixture of shock and confusion. "Sarah!" Mom exclaimed, her voice laced with disapproval. "How can you say that? Your sister is hurting." "Is she?" I asked, my gaze fixed on Chloe, who was now staring at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Or is she just doing what she always does? Playing the victim?" "What are you talking about?" Chloe stammered, her lower lip trembling. "I'm talking about the fact that those weren't Liam's words, were they?" I said, taking a step closer to her. "Those were my words. Words I told you, in confidence, about how I was feeling. And you used them. You twisted them around to make yourself look even more pitiful." Chloe's face paled. Mom gasped. Dad looked completely bewildered. I don't know what you're talking about," Chloe whispered, avoiding my gaze. "Oh, I think you do," I said, my voice rising slightly. "It's always been about you, hasn't it, Chloe? Every family vacation, every holiday, every single day. You're the star, and the rest of us are just supporting characters in your little drama." "That's not true!" Chloe cried, tears streaming down her face. "Isn't it?" I challenged. "Think about it. Who always gets the best of everything? Who always gets their way? Who always gets all the attention, even when someone else is clearly struggling?" I looked at Mom and Dad, their faces etched with disbelief. "You two enable it. You've always enabled it. You've always treated Chloe like she's the fragile one, the one who needs constant coddling, while I'm just expected to be strong and independent and never ask for anything." "Sarah, that's not fair," Dad finally said, his voice firm. "Isn't it?" I repeated, my voice shaking with emotion. "For 28 years, I've watched as Chloe has been put on a pedestal, while I've been left to fend for myself. I paid my own way through college. I've built a successful career, and what do I get? Relegated to the bunk beds on a vacation I planned and paid for. The dam finally broke, and years of suppressed frustration and resentment poured out of me. "I'm done," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'm done being the invisible daughter. I'm done trying to please everyone else while my own needs are completely ignored." I turned and walked back into the cabin, slamming the screen door behind me. I went straight to my room, the one with the queen bed now, and started packing my bag. A few minutes later, Mom followed me in, her face a mask of hurt and anger. "How could you do that to your sister?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "She's heartbroken." "And I'm not?" I retorted, zipping up my suitcase. "For years, I felt like a ghost in this family, like my feelings don't matter. Well, guess what, Mom? I'm done being a ghost." "Where do you think you're going?" Dad asked, appearing in the doorway, Chloe sniffling behind him. "I'm going home," I said, picking up my suitcase. "This vacation is clearly not what I thought it was going to be." "But we just got here," Chloe wailed. "Yeah, well, maybe you can all enjoy the rest of your special Chloe-centric vacation without me," I said, stepping around Dad and heading for the front door. "Sarah, don't be ridiculous," Mom called after me. "You can't just leave." I didn't answer. I walked out to my car, tossed my suitcase in the trunk, and got in. As I started the engine, I glanced back at the porch. Mom and Dad were standing there, looking stunned, while Chloe stood behind them, still crying. For a moment, a pang of guilt hit me. But then I remembered all the years of feeling overlooked and unappreciated, and the guilt quickly faded. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the lake house, leaving my family behind. As I drove, a sense of freedom washed over me. It wasn't the happy, relaxing freedom I'd hoped for from this vacation, but it was a freedom nonetheless. The freedom of finally putting myself first. The drive home was long and quiet. I didn't turn on the radio, just let my thoughts wander. I replayed the events of the past 24 hours in my head, the sleeping arrangements, the lasagna, Chloe's breakup, and with each replay my resolve grew stronger. I couldn't keep living my life trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the sun was just starting to rise. I felt exhausted, but also strangely lighter. I carried my suitcase inside, dropped it in the hallway, and went straight to the kitchen to make myself a cup of coffee. As I sat at my kitchen table, sipping my coffee and watching the sunrise, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from Mom. "Chloe is really upset. Can you please call her?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Then, I typed out a reply. "No, not right now." I turned off my phone and took another sip of my coffee. The silence in my apartment felt different than the silence at the lake house. This silence was peaceful, a blank slate. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the space to finally write my own story. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Mom. She apologized for how things had gone at the lake house. She admitted that they had always favored Chloe, and that they hadn't always appreciated me the way they should have. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start. Chloe also reached out, sending me a long text message expressing her regret for using my confidences against me. She said she was going through a tough time with Liam and wasn't thinking clearly. I didn't reply immediately, but the fact that she'd reached out at all felt significant. Things didn't magically change overnight. Our family dynamic was deeply ingrained, and it would take time and effort from everyone to truly shift it. But for the first time, I felt like I had created some space for myself. I had set a boundary, and my family had, to some extent, acknowledged it.